Deep dive. We're diving into a podcast script today, all about healthy habits, even when you're super busy, which I think a lot of us are. Um,
It is interesting how this script approaches it.
Yeah.
It's really not about like overhauling your entire life.
Real good.
Just like little tiny changes that you can actually sustain.
Yeah, it's like finally we can ditch that whole like go big or go home mentality when it comes to like health and wellness.
Just celebrate the small wins.
Cool.
Because, realistically, when you're busy, even remembering to drink enough water can feel like a major
Oh,
accomplishment.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so speaking of small wins, this one in the script made me laugh out loud. They suggest sneaking in squats while you're brushing your teeth. Like, is that genius multitasking or a recipe for a mouthful of toothpaste? I don't know. I'm kind of torn.
I will admit I chuckled when I read that too, but I think the principle is spot on.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. How much time do we all spend every single day on autopilot, like brushing our teeth, waiting for the coffee to brew?
Right.
Why not leverage those moments to move a little bit?
That is such a good point.
Yeah.
It's not about, needing that hour at the gym or whatever. It's like finding these little pockets of time
Exactly.
throughout the day. So speaking of finding those little pockets of time, they also talk about nutrition hacks in here,
Yes.
which I know is something you're into.
Absolutely. And the thing that stood out to me the most was their emphasis on simple meals, like go-to meals.
Right.
That the 20-minute rule, which I love, it totally debunks that myth that healthy eating equals hours in the kitchen.
Thank goodness.
Right.
Like, who has time for that? Like, on a Wednesday night? I mean, come on.
Exactly. It's unrealistic.
It's about having, like, those quick, nutritious recipes that you know and you can access easily so that when hunger strikes, you're not like, ooh, let's order takeout.
It's like a lifeline,
Exactly.
like a culinary lifeline. And it really is all about like being prepared and planning ahead and stuff like that.
Speaking of being prepared,
Hmm.
what about exercise?
Yeah.
Because they talk about micro workouts.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that was intriguing, especially for people who, maybe think they hate exercise or they just can't imagine, an hour at the gym
Right.
after a long day.
It's finding those moments where you can fit just like a little burst of
Yeah.
activity into what you're already doing.
It's like sneaking it in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like you're like an exercise ninja.
Yes. And you would be surprised how effective just those little bursts can be.
Interesting.
They actually give an example of a micro workout. It's 1 minute of jumping jacks, 1 minute of squats, push-ups, lunges, and planks.
So it's like a greatest hits
Exactly.
of exercises, but in like a really doable way.
Yes.
Okay, so we've talked about sneaking in squats while we're brushing our teeth. We've talked about 20-minute meals. We've talked about being like a ninja warrior when it comes to exercise.
I love it.
But I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something that's so important but so often gets pushed aside, and that's mental health and sleep.
So important.
Because it's like all this other stuff.
Right.
If you're sleep deprived and you're stressed out,
Yeah. All those healthy choices go out the window.
it's just not going to happen.
It's not sustainable.
Right, exactly. And this script talks about that it really emphasizes that link between sleep and mental health and even productivity.
They're not luxuries. They're the foundation
Exactly.
for everything else.
It's like you're building a house.
Yeah.
You can't build it without a strong foundation.
Exactly.
So what are some like really tangible takeaways
Mm-hmm.
in terms of improving sleep and managing stress? Because I feel like those are two things
Two big ones.
that a lot of us struggle with,
Oh, sure.
especially when we're busy.
You know what's so great about this script is it really keeps it really practical and simple.
Good, because I need that.
Like even just creating a consistent bedtime routine,
Okay.
even if it's just, dimming the lights an hour before you go to bed.
Oh, see, that's hard for me.
I know.
Putting my phone away an hour before bed? No way.
But just think about it. You're setting yourself up for better sleep, which then sets you up for a more productive, less stressful day.
True.
It's all connected.
Okay, so that, and then what else do they talk about in here?
Mindfulness practices.
Oh, sure.
And we're not talking about like hour-long meditation sessions or anything, but just taking a few minutes to just focus on your breath can make a world of difference.
It's true.
It really is.
It's like you're just hitting the pause button
Yes.
on like the runaway train of thoughts.
Yes. That's a
Yeah.
great way to put it, just to reconnect with yourself, quiet that mental chatter for a few minutes.
I like that. And it's
Yeah.
all about, like we were saying, those small changes can make a big impact.
Absolutely. And speaking of small changes leading to big impact, there's this really interesting thing that the script talks about, this like paradox. that we often neglect self-care the most when we're the busiest, even though that's when we need it the most.
It's so true. It's such a classic trap, right?
Yeah.
Like, we think, oh, I'm so busy, I don't have time for self-care. But this script is like, no, no, no.
It's like self-care is the key to productivity,
Yes.
not the opposite.
And I love how they talked about how it's not just, bubble baths and face masks.
Right.
It's about what truly recharges you,
Yes.
what fills your cup, and like making time for that even when you're super busy.
Yes, and recognizing that that looks different for everyone you know.
Totally.
For some people, it might be a 15-minute walk in nature. For someone else, it might be putting on music and dancing around their living room.
It's giving yourself permission
Exactly.
to like pause and recharge.
Yes, and to recognize that that's not selfish, it's actually essential.
Totally. And it's not just essential for like our own sanity.
Yeah.
It actually makes us more productive.
Absolutely. When we're feeling depleted and burned out, everything feels harder.
Everything is a struggle.
Yes.
So it's like we really are investing in our well-being and ultimately our productivity.
And the science backs that up. I mean, there have been studies that show that even short breaks,
Right?
strategically timed throughout the day, can have such a big impact on your focus, on your creativity, on your productivity.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked about, the individual actions we can take. But one thing that I was thinking about as I was reading this was, it focuses on those individual actions. But what about the role of our environment
Interesting.
and the people around us in shaping our habits?
It's huge.
It's like, how do we create a context that actually supports those healthy choices?
It makes me think about, if you're surrounded by people who are, staying up till 2:00 in the morning and, just eating junk food all the time and glorifying that, it's going to be a lot harder for you to make those healthy choices.
That's like you're swimming upstream.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's about being mindful of our environment, both physical and social. So like you said, if you're surrounded by, if your pantry is full of junk food,
Right.
that's going to be a lot harder than if it's full of, healthy snacks.
It's true. And like even like our workplaces, like
Oh, absolutely.
if we're expected to answer emails all night, it's
Yeah.
like, when am I supposed to sleep?
Yeah.
You know?
Right. And I think having those conversations and setting those boundaries as much as you can, really makes a big difference.
Yeah, for sure. So we've talked about the individual actions, the environment, and I think we also need to touch on like our social networks and the people we surround ourselves with.
Yes, because that's huge. It's like surrounding yourself with people who also value those things.
Right.
Makes a big difference.
It's like having a support system
Exactly.
for your well-being.
Yes.
Okay. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
We've established that our environment and the people around us can really influence our choices.
For sure.
But what if we flipped the script
Yeah.
and we actually tried to shape our environment to make those healthy choices inevitable?
Oh, I like that.
Instead of just like, going with the flow and being like, well, everyone around me is eating pizza, I guess I'll eat pizza too.
Right.
Like, what if we actually were intentional about creating an environment that supports our goals?
I love that.
So that's something to think about.
Yes.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive today.
It's been so fun.
It has been so fun. To everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us on another deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
And remember, you are the architect of your well-being. Start small, stay curious, and never underestimate the power of those tiny changes.
Well said.
Until next time, keep diving deep, keep exploring, and keep taking care.